Alright, welcome back to Star Ocean Anamnesis. So, today I have a character guide for you on Opera Vectra, so let's go. Opera is our first sharpshooter that's able to use the rifle. Her first talent, Heir to House Vectra, increases the entire party's damage dealt by 40%, or it increases the damage dealt for every party member standing at long range by 60%. An unconditional 40% damage buff is very nice, and a 60% damage buff for every long-range character is also incredibly good, seeing as how that's the highest damage buff that we currently have. And her second talent, Gambler, increases the entire party's defense by 15% when they're standing at close range, and for everybody who's standing at long range, they get a 15% chance of causing stun. The 15% defense buff makes every close-range character a bit more bulky, and it's also a very rare talent to begin with. And the chance of causing stun, now that's a very good one, and that can up your damage output dramatically. Her third talent, Drinker, gives her anti-flinch while she's attacking and reduces the damage that she takes by 40% while she's attacking. Now this is the talent that makes Opera stand out. It allows her to tank basically any attack, and you can use that to fill up your rush gauge a bit faster, and of course it also stacks with int and attack damage taken, so you could even further reduce the damage that you take. And then her last talent, Blazing Passion, reduces her AP cost by 30% and increases her attack damage dealt by 40%, both during skill chain 3 or more. The AP cost reduction actually allows her to fit one more attack in her combo, and then on top of that she increases her attack damage dealt by 40%, which is the highest attack damage buff that we have in the game, so that can up her damage output by a lot. And now moving on to her battle skills, first up we have Tracking Plasma. Fires an arc of several shots from a gun. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 220%, it does 5 hits, and it costs 17 AP. Opera, being a rifle user, has a lot of attacks that we haven't seen before, this being the first one. It's a very quick attack and doesn't cost a lot of AP, which makes it excellent combo filler. And then up next we have Gravitational Sphere. Fires a gravity bullet that crushes the enemy. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 360%, does 8 hits, costs 24 AP, and it has a dark element. This is a very interesting gravity bullet because it's actually really slow, which means that by the time it hits the enemy, you can actually build up a 300% cancel bonus, which makes it do more damage. Unfortunately, it still does less damage than the other damaging skills that she has, and it costs more AP than her other skill, so I don't really recommend you run this. And then up next we have Dispersion Ray. Leap into the air and fire a series of explosive bullets. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 710%, it does 5 hits, and it costs 32 AP. Now this is one of her main damaging skills, and it's actually a very decent one. So she jumps very high into the air, and then she launches some homing shots at the enemy. Has a huge multiplier. Now the only unfortunate part about it is that because she jumps into the air and she doesn't have an air dodge, she's completely vulnerable while she's up there, and if you're being targeted, you're most likely going to get hit. And then up next we have Electric Shockwave. Fire a powerful lightning beam. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 880%, it does 5 hits, costs 36 AP, and it has a lightning element. And this is her other big damaging skill. It has a higher multiplier than Dispersion Ray, but it's a bit slower, and it's also a lot more inaccurate because it's not homing like Dispersion Ray. However, it is a lot safer because she can actually dash out of this, and it also has a free lightning element. And then lastly, we have Hyper Launcher. Summon a launcher that fires a massive laser. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 4000%, and as a post-rush buff, it increases critical hit chance and damage by 30% for 20 seconds. First of all, damage-wise, this rush really isn't anything special. It has a 4000% multiplier, which is kind of high right now, but it's starting to become more and more common as time goes on, and Opera only has a 2500 attack stat, which is really low, so those two things paired together means that this rush isn't that great damage-wise, so that's why I recommend putting it somewhere halfway through the rush combo chain. But that post-rush buff is very excellent. Critical hit chance on its own isn't really anything special, but when you pair it with critical hit damage, it actually becomes a very nice way of increasing your damage output. So damage-wise, this rush isn't great, but buff-wise, it's actually very good. Moving on to her equipment, it's very unfortunate for Opera because rifles were actually introduced alongside of her, which means that right now there's only 4 rifles available to us, and that doesn't give her much choice. So the first weapon I recommend is the Vampire Blaster. It has a 514 attack stat, and as a first factor, it increases your attack by 15%, reduces your in-damage taken by 10%, and at Limit Break 3, you unlock the last factor, which gives you a 10% life steal. Out of all the free rifles that we have, I would say that this is the best one. The attack increase actually has an effect on Opera. The in-damage reduction works very well with her, because like I said, the in-damage actually stacks with her damage reduction talent, so you can even further reduce the damage that you take. And the lifesteal is also really good, because while Opera is made for tanking, she doesn't really have a way to heal herself, so that's why you have lifesteal here, and you can actually turn her into a very good tank like this. And of course, as a gotcha weapon, she only has one weapon to choose from, the pulse rifle, which imbues your attacks with lightning, gives you 50% AP recovery when you're standing still, and at max limit break you unlock a 70-20 guts. This weapon is good because of the lightning imbuement and the AP recovery speed, of course, and it has an 1100 attack stat, which is really high. But one of Opera's best skills, the electric shockwave, already has a lightning element on it, which means technically you could run the vampire blaster and then just keep spamming electric shockwave and get basically the same result as you would with pulse rifle. Of course, your rush doesn't have an element, and your other attacks won't either, but you do get in damage reduction as well as that lifesteal, which can make for a very nice tank setup. And that actually leads very well into the accessories, because if you're running the vampire blaster, you can run the ring of healing, which reduces attack damage taken by 10% and gives you a 2% HP recovery every 5 seconds. This way you can reduce the in-damage that you take as well as the attack damage that you take, and you have your normal damage reduction. So you basically have a 50% damage reduction constantly, which makes you very tanky, and then you have the lifesteal from the vampire blade as well as the HP recovery from this. So Opera should make for a very good tank. But of course, you could also run this accessory, the Pure White Beret, which reduces in-damage taken by 15% and increases your HP by 5%. So if you're running the pulse rifle, you can use either this or the Ring of Healing, depending on the type of enemy that you're fighting. And now moving on to her battle skills. So first of all, I recommend Tracking Plasma, because it's a very good combo filler, and it's also really fast and safe on top of that. And then secondly, I recommend Dispersion Ray, because this is her one of her main damage skills. It's very fast, can do a lot of damage, and you can also use it to dodge attacks, maybe if you're good with it. And then lastly, I recommend the electric shockwave attack, which is again one of her main damage skills, and this is the one that you can use in situations where Dispersion Ray is a little too risky. Now technically you could also run her gravitational sphere, but the problem that I find with that is that it doesn't really do anything that her other 3 attacks can't already do, and it's just a lot better to have a Dispersion Ray attack that you can use during element burst stuns, and then electric shockwave outside of those, just to be safe. And with this setup, a combo that you can use can look like this: a normal attack into Tracking Plasma into Dispersion Ray into as many electric shockwaves as you can fit. And during element burst stuns, I recommend you do a normal attack into Ray into Plasma into as many rays as you can fit, because it's faster, so it does more damage, and you don't have to worry about getting hit. Regardless, because Electric Shockwave is at the end, you could make use of the Vampire Blaster just in case you didn't get her gotcha weapon, so it's good in that sense, and it's also a lot safer than using Dispersion Ray as your main attack, because like I keep saying, Dispersion Ray is very risky. Now moving on to a party setup, while Opera can benefit close-range party members, she actually benefits the long-range party members a lot more, so for that reason, I want to make a long-range setup. So our first character is Summer Miria. She can buff single target damage for everybody that's not being targeted by 30%, she buffs HP by 20% for the entire party, and she also reduces int damage taken for the entire party by 20%. And then secondly, I recommend a Leon. He can buff int for the entire party by 40%, buffs attack for the entire party by 30%, and he also increases AP recovery speed for every long-range weapon ally by 30%. And then lastly, I recommend a Dream Welch. She can buff attack and int damage for the entire party by 10% or 25% at skill chain 3 or more. She can also debuff the enemy so that they take more damage when their HP is below 50%, and she also heals the entire party. This party's main gimmick is fighting from range, so Summer Miria, while being a Blade and Sheath user, actually excels at fighting from range, so that way she can get most of the buffs from everybody else. And Summer Miria is also interesting because she can give the entire party in damage reduction, which, like I said, stacks with Opera's damage reduction, which can turn Opera into quite a tank. And then, of course, we have Leon as the buffer, and maybe as a damage dealer as well. The AP recovery can also help out every long-range character in this party. And then we have Welch. Technically, you could also replace Welch with Summer Sophia, and that might pair better with Opera, seeing as how Summer Sophia is a lightning user and Opera is kind of restricted to lightning at this point. So you could do that. I just chose Welch because her buffs and debuffs are a bit better than Summer Sophia's. Overall, Opera can fit into a bunch of different parties, but she mostly benefits long-range parties, so if you're trying to build something with her, keep that in mind. So to summarize, Opera is a very good buffer for long-range characters. She has a 60% damage buff for everybody standing at long range, and she can also increase their rate of stun by 15% when they're standing at long range. So if you like invokers or healers or even sharpshooters of any kind, Opera is a very good character to have. And then Opera herself is also really special because she has a talent that allows her to reduce the damage that she takes by 40% while she's attacking, and she also gets super armor while she's attacking. She's able to stand in the midst of weak attacks and build her rush a lot more quickly that way, and seeing as how she's a rifle user, she actually has increased aggro draw, which means that you could technically run her as a makeshift defender. But one of the downsides that I found to playing Opera, aside from the fact that rifles are non-existent right now, is the fact that her two main attacks, Dispersion Ray and Electric Shockwave, leave a lot to be desired. Dispersion Ray can do a lot of damage really quickly, but it's also risky to compensate. She jumps into the air, and she doesn't have an air dodge, which means that as soon as the boss attacks her while she's up there, she's going to take some unnecessary damage. And Electric Shockwave does not have that same limitation. You can actually dash out of it, but Electric Shockwave does not have a homing effect like Dispersion Ray. It's also a lot slower, which means that bosses can move out of it, and that can make you lose some decent DPS. Regardless, Opera is still a very excellent damage buffer, and most long-range parties will be very glad to have her among their ranks. And that's it for the character guide on Opera. So, we're getting the main characters tomorrow, and I'm very excited for those, so if you're going to pull for them and you want to know how to play them, stay tuned for those character guides, and I guess I will see you all next time. Peace!